Hello, hello. How is everyone this evening? Let me know if I'm coming through loud and clear. Let's see. Who have I got with me so far? Gypsy, Jess, the Daily Ghost, Jamie, Chris, Big Crack Rock, Anthony Jordan, Sean Sr. How are you guys doing this evening? All right, coming through loud and clear. First off, I want to apologize. Logitech introduced some new webcam software today. I don't know why. They've not touched their webcams and they've not done anything new with their webcams in like 10 years. And today they decide to introduce some new software. So the image on my end is not that great. I fiddled with it a little bit, but this was about the best I could do. Okay, coming through loud and clear. Thank you. Thank you. I am just absolutely honored to be joined tonight by a writer and director, guy who's been in the movie industry for nearly 40 years, the man behind some of my favorite films, Jack's Back, Roadhouse, Gladiator, Striking Distance, A Murder of Crows. Really talented filmmaker. I am really just tickled pink to have him here with me tonight. And that's Mr. Rowdy Herrington. How you doing, sir?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm doing very, very well. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your schedule to talk to us film nerds. I really appreciate it.
I'm happy to do it.
Well, thank you. Thank you very, very much. We'll go ahead and get the ball rolling. I don't want to take up too much of your time here. I really want to ask you about the origins of your name, because when I first looked you up on IMDb, I was like, Rowdy. It makes perfect sense that the guy who directed Jack's Back and Roadhouse and Gladiator, it makes perfect sense that his name's Rowdy. What are the origins of Rowdy?
Well, my given name is Howard, and I was named after my uncle. And at one point in time, we all shared a house. There was a very large house we were on the upper floors and he was on the lower floors. And I was a youngster. And so rather than having two Howards or little Howard, I was Howdy. My mother called me Howdy. And that was my family name. And I got into, in ninth grade, I made the varsity wrestling team and I had to be bussed up to the high school. And the captain of the wrestling team said, "What's your name?" And I said, "Howdy." And he said, "No, we can't introduce you as Howdy. Your name is Rowdy." And I said, "Okay." I had gotten Howdy dutied to death. So it was a relief. And I just thought maybe I'll get more dates, you know.
Well, did you live up to that name on the wrestling team?
I did all right, especially actually in my first 2 years, I was pretty good. But then I started to grow, and it was really a challenge to lose weight. And I was tall and thin, and I didn't have near as good a record my junior and senior year as I did in my first two.
What movie or movies inspired you to want to become a filmmaker?
Well, I think that the very first time that I had an inkling that it was a fabulous business, I went to see The Graduate. And I was knocked out by it. And I walked out of the theater. I went around the ticket booth and went right back in and watched it again. And then there was Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, where, you know, I started to see that this idea of storytelling in that medium was really powerful. And I was always interested in writing. I got a lot of encouragement, even in high school, in my English class, you know, on assignments. I kept having things read to the class. And, you know, there's nothing as important as encouragement. You know, I mean, I think that it's literally the light at the end of the tunnel. it pushes you forward. And, like in my senior year in high school, we had to do a paper on Beowulf. And I wrote it from the point of view of Howard Cosell. And again, my English teacher said, you ought to think about a career in the creative world, advertising. You have a very clever mind. And when I graduated, I went to Penn State University. And I decided, hey, well, maybe I'll major in advertising. And as it turned out, it was in the journalism department. And that turned out not to be so great for me. The very first course that I had to take, the professor was really a stickler for spelling, which was not my strong suit. And he sort of drummed me out of there. So I became an English major. And, I took every writing course that they had at Penn State. And when I was done with those, I was thinking, I'm not really interested in reading Thackeray, Mm. So I ended up walking past the television studio in the Buki building on campus, taking a shortcut because it was freezing cold. And I saw these kids in there, with the cameras and lighting, and I thought, that looks like fun. So I switched my major and became a television major. And I really had a great time. And it was interesting because I always approached everything from the point of view of writing interesting stuff. So it was everything I did was very different. I was the only one to do a drama when we had our TV project. I did a radio drama for my radio. I ended up getting appointed, I guess you could say. There was a exchange program with the University of Manchester. And they asked me if I'd like to do that. And I said, yeah, I would. So I spent my senior year in England and got to intern at Granada Television and saw a lot of really interesting stuff. I watched them do drama, and I was really, really excited by the world of show business. Mm-hmm. And when I graduated, unfortunately, it was in the middle of affirmative action. So it was very difficult for a white boy like myself to break especially into the television market. They were looking to hire women and minority folks who had been shut out for years and years. Mm. And I was lucky enough to catch on a part-time job at WQED in Pittsburgh. And it was kind of funny because when I got out of school and I couldn't find a job, my brother was a steel worker. And he said, would you like to work in the mill? The money's really, really good. And I said, I might as well. And so I went down to the employment office and signed up. And that night, they called me to come out at midnight. My brother had called his foreman and told him that I'd signed up, and they called the office. And the next thing I know, I was going in with my brother. But that's, I'm Irish, and there was this whole clique there. So anyway, I was working in the mill, and I finally got an opportunity. QED called me and said, we'll give you, a limited amount of hours, but, we'll bring you in. And I thought, now what am I going to do? I'm working in the steel mill. So I went to the foreman and I told him what was going on, that, I'd majored in television and that the public television station was going to hire me, but it was only going to be part-time. And he said, have them give me your schedule on Thursday, and I'll use you as my plug-in guy whenever, and we'll work around the schedule that they've given you, which was phenomenal. I never expected it. And so I did that for 4 or 5 months. And then as I got more hours at QED and I learned more things, we essentially were the production crew, putting up sets, lighting the sets, stage managing. And, the big show there was Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. So I got to work on that show and meet Fred, and, everything you've heard about Fred is true. One of the best people in the world.
See, I was actually going to ask you, You know, your career has spanned almost 40 years. You've worked as a gaffer, a stage manager, a writer, a director, but your very first gig was in 1975, in which you played the black and white panda on Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood.
Yeah, I went in there in 1974, and that was actually, I think, my first credit.
Yeah.
They never credited the production crew on any of the TV shows that we worked on. The thing that really changed for me, though, WQED talked National Geographic into putting their product on public television while I was working at QED. And so WQED got an assignment from National Geographic to make 10 half-hour episodes called Decades of Decision, which was about the American Revolution. They were dramas, and I got to work on them. And that's when I realized everything sort of came together at that point, that writing and filmmaking was the way to pursue all of my interests that were really about drama. So it took me a while, I ended up, things slowed down at QED and I got laid off, and I ended up moving to Washington, D.C. And I worked, doing lighting and, for commercials and industrials and some of the government films, and, it was sporadic. And I heard about an opportunity that they were looking for summer relief directors in Baltimore for the Westinghouse station, Channel 13. And, on a kind of on a lark, because my experience in directing at that point was pledge night at QED, where I got to push camera A, camera B, that was not serious. Anyway, I went up for the interview and I met the production manager, and I guess she liked me, because when I got home, I was about half in the bags with some friends from Penn State. We were drinking beer and the phone rang, and it was this production manager. One of their directors was in a car accident and was in the hospital. And she said, "Can you be at work at 7 o'clock?" I said, "Absolutely." So I went up, and it was a very challenging experience. It was the afternoon news. There was no assistant director, no technical director, no sound man. So in those days, it was, A and B roll film for news footage with carts that had voiceover, chroma key, videotape on some things. You had pedals to talk to the film change, pedals to talk to the videotape operator, chroma key, So the first couple of, newscasts I did were blown up. They were, it was pretty awful, going to black a lot. Mm-hmm. But, by the end of the week, I was, fear is a great motivator. Mm-hmm. And by the end of the week, I was able to do a good newscast. And, that job ended, and, but I had a tape of, a newscast that was perfect at a, a major station. So I applied at the NBC O&O, WRC in Washington, and I got a job as an operations director. Again, it was going to be supposedly for vacation relief for the people that worked there. And it was supposed to be 4 weeks. And the idea was that you had to join the Directors Guild to work for NBC. And what I was going to earn in 4 weeks was going to pay the dues for the Directors Guild. And I said, I'm good with that, As it turned out, I was in there until after Jimmy Carter's inauguration, before I got laid off. Mm. And I caught on to a film, Gaffing. Ossie Davis starred in a movie called A Man Who Loved the Stars, which is about Benjamin Banneker, who was the black surveyor who laid out Washington, D.C. And while I was on that film, I met a woman, Zelda Barron, who was the script supervisor, who had worked on big movies. And so I pulled on her coat and said, what should I do if I want to be in the movie business? And she said, you need to be in New York or Los Angeles. So that kind of sent me into that direction. I mean, wasn't interested in New York. It was cold, and the idea of California dreaming, surfing, that whole deal, seemed really cool. So I got a gig where I did a bunch of commercials in a row, and I had about $1,000, and I loaded everything I had in my car, and I drove to LA. And I'd never been to California. I'd never, I didn't know anybody. I just went. And it took me quite a while. I actually went back to Washington to work with my friends there that kept me going because I was broke up in Los Angeles. And I finally went to a party, and I met a gaffer named Chris Tufte, who's now a cinematographer. And Chris said that he had a crew, but he'd keep me in mind. I told him, that I was an electrician, and he ended up getting a job on a very low budget kung fu movie. And his guys didn't want to do it because the pay stunk. And I said, I'm in. And I worked hard, and then, he said, I'll keep you in mind. And then the next movie, a guy left early, and I went in, and then we worked together a whole bunch. And while I was on that movie, I met another guy who became a gaffer, and I became his best boy, Scott Butfield. Scott's also a great cameraman at this point in time. And, we did a whole bunch of bad movies. Humanoid from the Deep, and, but we learned a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, Robert Altman said, if you want to make movies, you have to make movies. So
thank you, Gypsy Warrior, for
something
that.
A lot of young.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to talk over you. Thank you, Gypsy Warrior, for that £1.99 super chat. We'll try to keep, if you guys have any questions for Rowdy, we'll try and keep those toward the end of the stream. We'll see if we have time for those. But I see a couple of good questions in the chat so far. But yeah, I was going to say, you had a very interesting journey to becoming a filmmaker. I've heard of writers becoming directors, and I've heard of cinematographers becoming directors, and editors becoming directors, but I've never heard of a gaffer becoming a director. What exactly does a gaffer do on a film set?
You're the chief lighting technician. So you work for the director of photography. So in a sense, I was writing scripts in between the movies that I worked on, because, we would catch a movie for 5 or 6, or really good ones, 7 or 8 weeks. And in between, I was writing, actually, it turned out to be Jack's back. But the thing about it is that working on the set, working for the cameraman, and observing all the things that have to happen in order to make a scene, in a sense, I mean, the logical move from gaffer is, for a lot of my friends, was to cameraman. But because I was interested in writing, I was much more interested in directing. And the thing about, doing your time as a technician, or just, getting in on the ground floor and watching, in the old days, when you wanted to practice a craft, you were apprenticed to a master. And for 7 years, you were an apprentice. And you swept the floors, you went for the sandwiches, you did the dirty work, but you're there watching everybody work, how it all goes together. From 7 to 14 years, you were a journeyman. And the master gives you specific elements of the craft to be in charge of, that he oversees. And so after 14 years, out you go, and you hang up your own shingle. And it was 14 years to the day almost in the business before I got to direct a movie. And, that served me very well. The very first day I walked on the set to do Jack's back, I knew what I was doing. I was confident. I had written the script. I had gotten a really good cast. And I hired a cameraman I had gaffed for, and who I knew was, Shelley Johnson, who was a very good cameraman. And off we went.
What did you learn about filmmaking from working on from being a gaffer on sets like Repo Man, working for Alex Cox, or Nightmare on Elm Street, which my viewers are very familiar with, and Wes Craven?
Right. Well, everything. You see what everybody does, but more important, it's about staging, camera angles, and it's when we had a good director like Wes Craven, or I did 2 pictures with Andrei Konchalovsky, who was a wonderful director. Watching how they worked, their interaction with the actors, and then almost even more important, Jason, were the directors that I worked with that weren't too good, because you would watch their mistakes and go, boy, I'm glad I didn't do that.
Mm-hmm.
I'll give you an example. I did a picture with Shelley Johnson was the cameraman, called Night Flyers. It was in outer space. It was not a great movie. And the director he yelled at his people, which is always bad in my opinion. And one day he was particularly frustrated, and he started to scream about a candelabra. He wanted a candelabra. There's supposed to be a candelabra in here. So this poor prop girl, she runs all the way back to the prop room. She gets a candelabra and she runs onto the set. She holds it up, and he said, "I wanted a broken candelabra." So she smashed it on the table and handed it to him. House came down, and you never want that. Crew laughing at you.
Yeah.
And the opposite of that is somebody like Wes Craven, who we were watching him work, and how smart he was, and how scary that goddamn movie was. I mean, it was scary on the set. Freddie, he ate lunch with us. He creeped us out, man. That was Johnny Depp's first movie.
Yep.
Yeah,
it was.
And it was a lot of fun. And, one day we all dressed up. Wes used to wear plaid shirts and khaki pants. And one day the whole crew came in with plaid shirts and khaki pants. And it took them a little while to figure it out. And Scott Butfield and I, the gaffer, were standing up on the perms. And he looked up at us when he figured it out, and then he bowed. He was a wonderful man,
Yeah.
He seemed like a sociology professor or something.
Yeah.
He had this twisted idea and could scare the shit out of you,
Yeah.
So
he actually did teach for a short time. So yeah.
Lucky students.
What's that? I'm sorry.
Lucky students.
Yeah, exactly. Very much so. Yes. I heard you once say that directing a film is well, actually, I've jumped ahead. I heard one director say, I don't remember the director's name, that directing a film is trying to organize chaos. How would you describe directing a film? Give us kind of an understanding of what the director's job is on a set.
Well, first and foremost, you're the leader.
Yeah.
And from my point of view, there are some simple leadership paradigms. You don't care where the idea comes from if it's a good idea. There's nothing you can't accomplish if you don't care who gets the credit. You have an open door. And all things come to the man who's kind in a high place. That's from the I Ching. So, I think that because I had the experience of working with a lot of directors and watching how they work and how they command respect, I had a pretty good idea myself of how I wanted to lead. One of the things that I think made it easier for me than maybe somebody that was just coming in first time was that I've only been working with scripts that I wrote or rewrote. So I had a confidence in that. When I did Jack's Back, I think the hardest thing for me were the things that I had not experienced before. I was never in post-production. So the editing process was a little frightening, especially with a short schedule. And the other thing was casting. I'm sitting in a room by myself, and there's a casting director bringing these guys in to read for the character of John and Rick in Jack's Back. And I listen to them and I look at them and I go, I'm in trouble. Nobody's getting it. Now, is the script good or is it me? You know? And then one afternoon, James Spader walked in and he read, and I was blown away. And I said, I got it. And he said, you want me to do it again? I said, no, that was perfect. He said, I can do it again. I said, no, I'm telling you, it was great. And he said, well, what do you think? I said, well, you're the very best person I've seen. You know, and he said, well, okay, give me the part. I said, well, I'll let you know. So I go home, and about 8 o'clock, my phone rings, the house phone. And I pick it up, and I say, hello, and I hear, Rowdy? I said, yes. He said, Jimmy. He said, excuse me? He said, Jimmy Spader. I said, oh, hi. How'd you get my number? You're in the book. He said, I want to do this movie. I'll say, I see what I can do. So, you know, the producer of the film was Elliot Kastner. And this is a funny story too, because I was gaffing a movie in, we were in New Mexico, in the Santa Fe. And I had sent the script for Jack's Back to my friend Tim Moore, who was a key grip that I worked with a whole bunch. And he read the script and he got back to me and he said, this is ready to shoot. This is really a good script. And I said, oh man, thanks. That means a lot to me. He says, you know, I'm working with this producer, and he asked me what I wanted to do. But, you know, Tim is really smart. Tim, just to fill in the blank here, Tim is now producing for Clint Eastwood. As a matter of fact, they're in New Mexico. They're going to start another picture. Anyway, Tim said, I'm working for this producer named Elliot Kastner, you know, and, you know, he really likes me. And I knew why, because if you wanted to know what was going on the set, you could ask Tim. Are they going to make their day, you know, whatever. And Elliot told Tim, if you want to be a producer, find a good piece of material and get it to somebody like me. So Tim gave him the script. And when you open the script, it said, 100 years ago in the city of London, a man shocked the world by murdering, raping, and mutilating 5 women. He was never caught. You turn the page and it said, Jack's Back. And
Did you do a lot of research into Jack the Ripper?
Yeah, because the original script was more convoluted. I mean, I had this idea about murder mystery about twins, and I got it from a radio program. It caught my ear on NPR because they were talking about 2 black men from Pittsburgh, one of whom was on death row and the other was a doctor. And I thought, wow. And I listened to the story and I started thinking, isn't that an interesting dichotomy for a drama? And it morphed into Jack's Back. What eventually happened, I mean, I started to write the script with black characters. And I decided that I needed a more simplified, straightforward plot because I had this convoluted, you know, conspiracy theory plot that I didn't really have a lot of faith in. So I went to the library, and this is 1987. And I looked up Jack the Ripper, and it said he had murdered these women in 1888. And I realized it was about to be the 100th anniversary. So the idea of a 100th anniversary copycat killer just set me off. So when Elliot read Jack's Back, he handed just the title page. He handed it to Tim and said, make it for $900,000. So Tim calls me on the phone and he says, Elliot Kastner wants to do Jack's Back. And I said, you're kidding me. He said, no. And he said, he wants to meet you. I was like, wow. Well, I'm working on this movie, but I'm off Saturday and Sunday. I can fly back to LA, see him on Saturday. So I do. And I get to the Beverly Hills Hotel where I'm supposed to meet him. And he didn't show up. I'm there an hour and a half. I finally go up to the front desk and I said, my name's Rowdy Herrington and I was supposed to meet Elliot Kastner. Is there a message for me? And they said, no. And I turned around and there was a very attractive woman with her suitcase standing behind me. And she leaned in a little bit and she said, pardon my French here, he's going to fuck you. I said, excuse me? She said, he's going to fuck you. I'm like, whoa. So it turns out Elliot Kastner's reputation is not so good. He's being sued by just about everybody in Hollywood. So I go home. Sunday morning, I have to get on an airplane and go back to Santa Fe. And the phone rings and it's Elliot. And he said, come on down to the hotel. He said, I couldn't make it yesterday. They lost my luggage. I was like, well, sir, I can't do that because, I'm on this movie and I got a plane that leaves in 2 hours and, I got to be on it. So I went back to Santa Fe. Now, funny enough, this movie in Santa Fe was God Created Woman 2, with Roger Vadim directing again. And I really wondered if he knew what the hell he was doing, because we would shoot in one direction and then he'd turn around and shoot in the other direction and then turn around and go back to the other way. And we were like, this is killing us, man. This takes a lot of time. And they ended up, the production manager and the producer decided they were going to fire the first assistant cameraman because things were going so slow. And the director of photography was relying on the first assistant in what they deemed as too much and too involved and costing us too much time. So they're going to fire him. So we got the producer in the elevator and we said, you can't fire him for that. He's answering questions that his boss asked him. You can't fire him for that. And he said, well, I can do whatever I want. We said, okay, well then fire all of us. So the week went by and we thought, okay, well, we took care of that. And they fired all of us. So I went back to Los Angeles and Tim was back in LA and he called me and he said, listen, he said, you got to come down and meet Cassian Elwes. He's Elliot's nephew. He and I are going to produce the movie and they want to meet you. They're serious about this and don't worry about Elliot. So I said, okay. And I went down and as I said, I had drawn the script with those brothers as African-American characters. And Cassian said, listen, we're not racist, but in terms of box office, we've got to have the character be white. I was like, oh, really? And I had said it in Washington, D.C. They wanted to shoot in L.A., so we wouldn't go on location. And I thought about it for a little while, and I thought, okay, these characters are who they are, so it really doesn't matter what color they are. And so I said, yeah, I would change it and set it in Los Angeles. And I left. And they had a conversation then about who was going to direct the picture. And Tim said, you should let Rowdy do it. He's worked on 30 movies. Read the script. It's really visual. And so they called me on the phone. And they said, Cassian, would you like to direct the movie? And I said, absolutely. He said, well, here's the thing. We have to do it non-union. I said, well, I'm in the Directors Guild. He said, well, we can't do it DGA. And I said, then you have to find another guy. I said, I'm not going to start my career by getting kicked out of the union. And anyway, Tim, they got together and they sorted it out. We ended up, I guess, with $1 million budget. And they did the low budget agreement for the DGA. And I got to make the film.
Thank goodness. You mentioned James Spader earlier. I'm a big admirer of James Spader's work. He has a very unique kind of charisma. And I've always appreciated the fact that instead of pursuing the typical leading man kind of roles, he's been drawn to more, offbeat, interesting roles. But you gave him his very first starring role in Jack's Back, and you've gone on to work with him in 2 other films to date. What is James Spader like to work with?
Fabulous. You know, he's extremely intelligent. He's a brilliant actor. And, you know, I said at one point he was the second best actor in Hollywood. And actually, Leslie Stephenson asked me, who's the best actor? I said, I have no idea. There's always somebody better. So, you know, Jimmy and I hit it off right from the beginning. He really liked the script, and he had some great notes. And there was a couple of things he questioned me about. I said, no, I'm not changing that. I think that's good. And he trusted me. And we just really, you know, I mean, this was 25 days, you know. Another story, you know, when they signed me on as director, they wanted me to meet Michael O'Keefe for the role. Because Michael had been nominated for an Academy Award and, you know, for The Great Santini. So I met him at Musso Frank's in Hollywood, which is, you know, if you've ever been out there, it's like the old style Hollywood, you know, restaurant, you know, the old giant wooden booths, and just got atmosphere for days. And anyway, we sat there and had dinner. And he did about, I don't know, half an hour on his townhouse in New York that he was remodeling for $1 million. And toward the end of the conversation, he said, how many days do you have to shoot? And I said, 25. And he said, you can't make a movie in 25 days. And that's all I'd ever done.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we had a few movies that were longer, but some much shorter, you know, and I just thought, he's not my guy. So I went back to the producers and said, no, I want Spader. And they finally came back and they said, okay, Elliot wanted you to put Cindy Gibb in. And, you know, I said, great. She's great. Mm-hmm. So we made that deal.
Yeah, and the movie really rides or dies on Spader's performance, because if he's not convincing as both John and Rick, then the movie just doesn't work. I think it's a phenomenal performance. When was Spader method on set? Like when he was John, was he warm and laid back with everybody, and then when he was Rick, was he sort of cold? And
you know, in the moment, he certainly was, but in between, not so much. I mean, he has his own technique, but I wouldn't call him a method actor. Okay. You know, I've worked with actors who stayed in character, you know, the entire day. You know, Patrick was a little bit like that on Roadhouse, especially in his interaction with Jimmy Reno. You know, they just would stare at each other with hate in their eyes. Jimmy, you know, he asked me, can I wear a baseball cap for Rick? You know, I said, sure. You know, I mean, he was wanted to warm him up. And the way it was written, I mean, it's a really gentle character. Mm-hmm. And I'm here to tell you, when he walked on the set as Rick, all the girls went, whoa. You know, because, I mean, he looked, you know, he was like a bad boy.
Yeah.
Bad boys have heat.
Mm-hmm. There's two great scenes in Jack's Back where we learn so much about both Rick and John, and they're very simple scenes. The one scene, actually Roger Ebert pointed it out in his review of Jack's Back, where John is comforting the woman who's got the hand wound, and she's like, tell me about your grandkids, and which one's the naughty one? Oh, Ricky. Oh, I've got a brother named Ricky. He was the naughty one. And then, you know, by the end of it, she's not crying anymore. She's not in pain anymore. And she thanks him, and he goes, are you free Saturday night?
Right.
I love that.
That was that line, free Saturday night, was an ad lib by Spader.
Yeah,
and there's write that line. And he's done that for me a few times.
Yeah. And there's another great one toward the end of the film where Rick is staring into the camera and he's talking about his brother. And it's really the first time in the movie where he's kind of warm and he's kind of loose.
Right.
And he says, you know, everybody thought that I was
jealous of my brother.
Everybody thought I was jealous of my brother. That pissed me off. I never thought I was. So right. I you know.
Well, you know, Jason, it's called self-revelation. And in good drama, the arc of the character leads them to understand something about themselves that they didn't know at the beginning of the story.
Mm.
You give the character a desire. So they pursue this desire through the movie and becoming more and more driven and in some cases immoral to reach this desire. And when they reach it, they discover something about themselves that's way more important than this thing they were chasing. So Jack's back, Spader is trying to solve the murder of his brother, and he's going to great lengths to do it. And in the end, what he discovers is more about himself. And you know that he's moved to a higher plane. He understands, there's a scene where he's in his brother's apartment and he sees all the books. This is the path his brother went down and he did not. But he has the same potential. That's what he realizes in that scene. And
That's
the thing about it, when I eventually started to study screenplay structure, and I read about this thing, self-revelation, and I went, oh, I did that. I didn't know it, but my instincts, I guess, were strong enough that I understood that was what it was important.
Yeah. That's a great scene too, where it's after his brother's death. Right. And he's walking through his brother's apartment, just sort of turning lights off and on and looking at different things. And like the one thing that really struck me was the image of the unmade bed and him looking at the unmade bed.
Yes. And that's on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And him looking through the old pictures of great scene.
Yeah. The pictures of the two boys,
Yeah.
Actually I have let's see. That's the scene.
Yeah, that's the scene. Yeah. I love that sequence. There's yeah.
And in my heart.
Yeah. I also love I think Jack's Back has a great look. It's very atmospheric. How close did you work with Shelley Johnson to design the look of Jack's Back?
Well, Shelley had a style at that point in time. He used a lot of smoke, and part of the reason for that was it made his lighting easy and quick. So he said that he was going to do that, and I felt that there were times when there was too much atmosphere. There was one in particular was in the briefing for the detectives. It looked like there was a fire in there. Come on. When I saw the dailies, I was like, "Oh, Shelley, please slow down on this." But Shelley's a great cameraman. He just shot the Tom Hanks Greyhound movie.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, he's a terrific guy. He actually hired my brother. When the mills closed, my brother came to work with me and eventually became a gaffer. And he did a lot of movies with Shelley.
Well, the title and the story synopsis for Jack's Back just kind of makes it sounds like it's an exploitation movie through and through. But the copycat Jack the Ripper thing kind of it dissolves into the background. It's at a certain point in the film, and then really it's the brother trying to find the killer of his twin brother, and then it reemerges toward the end. How did you feel about now Paramount distributed the film, correct?
No, actually it was distributed by Elliot Kastner joined forces with Andre Blay, and they formed a company on
was it Palisades?
Palisades, yeah, Palisades Entertainment. And we didn't do any business. I got a call shortly after the movie by the guys at Miramax, and they wanted to know if I would be willing to do reshoots on Stepfather 2, and I am a stepfather. And my wife said, "You're gonna do that?" But anyway, I didn't. They said if they had Jack's Back, they would have made $30 million.
It seemed like a difficult film to kind of even on VHS, and I know Paramount distributed the VHS
Right.
because I mean, yeah, the front of it is just James Spader with the blurb about 100 years ago, and on the back it has the strangest photo of Spader. It's during that fight scene with Rex Ryan where he's holding a table,
Right.
and it's like even on VHS it was like a different. How do you, how do you,
Moment,
yeah.
Yeah, the marketing guys, I haven't had great experience with them. It's kind of like it's hit and miss, and in some cases you have to be lucky. Gladiator is a perfect example. We tested higher than Lethal Weapon. We had a 92 in our top 2 boxes at our preview.
Yeah, I can understand why.
Yeah, the marketing director from Columbia said, if this movie doesn't do $30 million, I should be fired. Well, guess what?
Yeah.
She had a string though. The Dick Donner film, and the title eludes me, but it was about child abuse. A father who was abusing his kids, which is a tough subject anyway. But anyway, they fired her.
Well, I've been a huge fan of Jack's Back ever since I first rented the movie on VHS, like in the mid to late 90s. I think it's very underrated and overlooked. I would encourage everybody to go out and watch it. It recently got a Blu-ray release from Scream Factory a couple of years ago. It's a great Blu-ray. Go and check that movie out. I cannot recommend it any higher. Do you happen to know why it took so long for Jack's Back to come to Blu-ray?
I believe it was because of whatever legal issues they had between Andre Blay and Elliot Kastner. Paramount offered to buy the picture, and so did MGM, and they decided they were going to take it out themselves. So I think that also hurt me. It did not hurt me in the sense that I got offered a job almost immediately. So, but in terms of the box office and the awareness of that film, that was a disappointment.
Yeah, I actually heard that James Spader inadvertently helped you get your next gig in Roadhouse.
That's correct, and that was again an ad lib. The scene where he goes to buy a gun, and my friend John Harrison, who's a director, he directed the television series Dune. He's done a lot of Tales from the Dark Side and all that stuff. This is another Pittsburgh guy, QED guy, great one, wonderful man. I cast him as the guy in the porn shop that's selling guns. Jimmy says, he wants to buy a gun. He says, "What's a nice kid like you want with a piece?" And Jimmy says, "Wedding present." And that was an ad lib. And when Joel Silver watched the movie, he watched it with Shane Black, and Shane's from Pittsburgh. And it came to that scene, and I guess in truth, Joel wasn't a big fan of Spader. And when that scene played, he got this huge smile on his face. He looked over at Shane. Shane said, "You got to get this guy."
Well, we were actually talking about we were talking about George Romero. You saw the Dawn of the Dead poster over my shoulder. What is it about Pittsburgh, do you think, that's birthed so many filmmakers like yourself, Romero, Shane Black, all of the Romero crew, actors like Tom Atkins, Tom Savini? I mean, it's such a wealth of very talented people.
A lot of it is because of George. When he wasn't making features, he was doing commercials. And, Harrison and my editor on a number of my films, Pat Buba, Dusty Nelson. There was a whole bunch of guys that got work because Savini, that got work because of George. Nick Mastandria, who's a major assistant director these days. Anyway, we all, I never got to work with George. I had already gone to LA by the time that I might have been in Pittsburgh when they did Dawn of the Dead, but I did not work on it. But I just loved the movie. George was a genius. The whole zombie world is George Romero. That's where it all came from.
Yeah, I always say there would be George Romero created modern zombie fiction, so everything that's followed him owes him a debt.
Yeah, I mean, he had such a cute idea about how to sell it. I mean, if you think about it, he fulfilled in Dawn of the Dead, he fulfilled two of the greatest fantasies that people have. You can shoot these things in the head and not feel guilty.
Mm-hmm.
And you can go into a mall and take anything you want.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Movie.
Yeah. But yeah, something in the water there in Pittsburgh, I think, creating all these great filmmakers.
We were lucky, there were good mentors, and QED also spawned a lot of people. Tom Sharonis, who directed all the Seinfelds, Tom was a director at QED, and Michael Keaton.
Yeah,
Michael worked with us on Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. He's gone on to have a fabulous career as an actor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned Joel Silver earlier. A lot's been said about producer Joel Silver. How was he to work with, or should I say work for?
It was great. Joel is a great producer. If I had an issue with Joel Silver, it was more about values. He saw Roadhouse as a film for 13-year-old boys. Mm. And I wanted to soften it because we're coming off of Dirty Dancing, and I knew that the girls were going to flood to go see the movie. And so I tamed down some things that got put back later. In my cut, I took out some of the vulgar language and some of the more, obvious, can I squeeze your tits for $20?
Yeah.
Joel put them back in. But first of all, he understood movies. He lives and breathes them. He had a great crew. So I walked in with top-notch professionals. The first day that we were going to shoot in the Double Deuce, I walked in, I looked around, and I'm trying to figure out where my angles are. And he came in, he went, they got to wreck this place. We've got to see it go from really bad to good. Look, it doesn't look that bad. So they went and smashed walls and did all kinds of stuff. And I went, holy cow, that should have been me.
Yeah.
And it was a good lesson about the arc. It's not just arc of story. The surroundings can be an arc that tells the story. Think about McCabe and Mrs. Miller. They're building that town, right? And as the town gets bigger and bigger, more trouble. Mm-hmm. So everything is important. Everything that's in your frame, is part of telling your story.
Mm-hmm. What was your first impressions upon reading the script for Roadhouse?
I hated it. And, I called my agent. I said, I'm not going to do this. They said, Rowdy, this is Patrick Swayze. This is a studio movie. This is a lot of money. I said, yeah, but, you can't make a good movie if you don't have a good script. And they went crazy.
Did you have any input on changing the script to kind of mold? Okay.
I did, yes. And, what happened first was Joel called me. And he said, Rowdy, they told me you're passing. And I said, yeah. He said, what's going on? I said, well, Joel, the script is, it's not so good. He said, well, what are you doing? Can you come down and see me? He said, I'm not going to pressure you to do this. He said, but I have other projects. And he said, I'm a producer in town. You're a talented director. I'd like to meet you. You can't say no to that. Mm-hmm. So I went down. Well, first I said, well, when do you want me to come? He said, come to 20th Century Fox at midnight. I said, midnight? He said, yeah, that's our lunch break. They're shooting Die Hard. So I went down to the Fox lot, and I'd never been on the studio lot. All the movies I had done were non-union. Mm-hmm. And so that was kind of fun. I'm looking around, and Joel takes me over, and they're blowing up the Fox building, and I met Bruce and McTiernan and a bunch of the crew. And we went back to his office, and he said, Rowdy, you said there's problems with the script. And I said, yeah. He said, that's why I need you. Next thing you know, he talked me into it. So I did do work to the script, and I worked with another writer, and then we had a writer's strike, and then some things got done that just happened to get done. And then we shot, and it was a really great experience. Patrick was a fabulous guy. And we got Sam Elliott, and that's kind of a funny story too, because Sam turned it down. So I called his agent and I said, listen, I am not going to pressure Sam, but would he meet me? I've got other projects, and I'm a director in town. He's a fabulous actor. I'd just like to have lunch with him. Would that be all right? And next thing I know, I'm having lunch with Sam on the lot. And we chatted for a little while, and I told him, I understand, what you think about the script. This is what I'm doing. This is what the things I'm going to change. And then I looked at him, leaned across the table. I said, Sam, if you don't do this movie, I'm fucked. And he got this big smile on his face. And I said, ask for more money. And, he saw that I wasn't an asshole, and he agreed to do the picture.
Yeah, I actually read somewhere that he said that, of his entire filmography, he gets recognized the most for Roadhouse.
Well, half the reason is because it's always on television.
That's true. That's true.
It just won't go away. And, nobody knew. Maybe Joel knew. I don't know. But the fact of the matter is we broke the record. That motion picture is shown more on television than any other motion picture in history.
Yeah, I've seen it on television a lot.
Yeah, I have DirecTV, and I will check because I get residuals for these movies, and I will check to see what's playing. Always playing, and I think this month there was 15 showings. So pretty crazy.
Was Roadhouse a tough production? I believe I read somewhere that Patrick Swayze was quoted as saying that halfway through he didn't know if he was going to be able to make it.
Well, he had injury to his knee that made everything difficult. He blew out his knee when he was a football player, and then he went on to become a ballet dancer for a major New York, Joffrey or somebody. I can't remember. But, he had his knee drained several times during the show. And, there were some serious fights. And, it was really, I had a great crew, Benny the Jet Urquidez and Charlie Pacherny as the stunt coordinator, and Marshall Teague played Jimmy Reno, and Marshall learned all the fights. And as I said, those guys had been in character and, staring at each other and, can't stand each other, so to speak, without speaking. Mm-hmm. And so Marshall learned to fight, and Patrick's in everything, so when he had a minute, he would go and work with Benny and Marshall to learn this big fight that we shot down at the river, because it was huge. Mm. And of course, Marshall knew the choreography and Patrick didn't, so Marshall got hit a lot. Mm. And he'd say, that's okay, it's okay. And, by the end of that, we shot 2 nights to complete that fight. They were brothers. Mm. And the day Patrick died. And you can ask Marshall Teague, but that's one of the closest friends he's ever had in his life. Mm. You a way of doing that, creating bonds. It's like going to war.
Yeah. You touched on working with Patrick Swayze a little bit earlier, but how was he? I mean, clearly the fight scenes were probably nothing for him, being a ballerina, being a dancer, and sort of. I've heard a lot of people say when it comes to those kind of staged fights, it's really more like a dance than a fight. So how is he to work with as an actor, and then when you're trying to stage and get coverage for all these action scenes?
Terrific. He had great sense of the dramatic moment, and he had a great sense of humor. And he's a gentleman, so it was very easy to say, let's try this, Patrick. And, he was never, I've worked with actors that get ruffled if you tell them anything, and rebel because, they think they're hung the moon, I guess. But the fact of the matter is that it was a really easy set. The one bit of trouble we had, the grips took Patrick out and got him really drunk one night. And we couldn't start shooting with him till, I don't know, like 3 p.m. And he didn't look so good. This was about the time, I think I've told this story on the DVD for Roadhouse, but one of the things that Joel Silver said all the time to me when I was worried about the schedule, because, it was very elaborate coverage, and we went over a number of days and we were a little behind, and he would say, don't worry about it. I'll tell you when to worry. And, don't worry about it. I'll tell you when to worry. I said, Joel, I don't know if I can make my day. Don't worry about it. I'll tell you when to worry. Well, after that business with Patrick, and we're on location, paying everybody per diem and hotels, and it was really expensive deal up there on the Kings River. He came on the set. He said, remember when I told you, I'll tell you when to worry? Yeah. He said, start fucking worrying. And I said, boys, we're going to pick up the pace.
Both Jack's Back and Roadhouse have a particular sense of humor about them. And really that sense of humor is present throughout all your work, I think. It's not, I wouldn't say it's necessarily comedic, but it's the kind of humor that kind of grounds the movie and gives people character. How would you describe your sense of humor?
Comic relief. As you point out, it's got to be situational, and in a lot of times it's just about the right line at the right moment that delights people. And when you're writing a screenplay, you search desperately for those. And the great news is you can take a week to figure it out. But when it plays in real time, that character has that line, bang, and the audience goes, wow, that guy's smart. I wish I could say that, kind of deal. And, you might have been searching and searching and searching. In some cases, I got a line that we put in, was the last reel of Stick Up. I called up John Livingston and said, get down to the mixing stage. I want to add a line. And I don't know if you remember where he's talking on the cell phone. He said, Ma, I got to go. And, it was a big laugh.
There's actually, I went and rewatched A Murder of Crows the other night, and I forgot how many of those lines Tom Berenger had in the film. I love his first. They're like, he's back from vacation. How you doing, Tom? Worse.
Yeah.
So,
who used to say that? I worked with Robert Mitchum on Maria's Lovers. And, when you ask him, how you doing, Bob, he'd say worse. And so, as a writer, I think the key to creativity is hiding your sources. Because for the most part, I would say there's a fair percentage of lines that I've heard people say that I save. And I find a way to use because they're so clever.
I think there's a talent to that, though, to be able to people watch and people listen and sort of, collect it in your head.
Yeah, it's what writers do. We're observers. And, one begets another. So, there's kind of an accumulation. And that's what writing is. Writing is the power of accumulation. One page at a time, building up, building up, building up, till you have a complete work.
Yeah. Now, Roadhouse is loved by many, including myself, including many people in the chat. There's a lot of love for Roadhouse in the chat right now. Watching Patrick Swayze roundhouse kick thugs for 90 minutes, I call that entertainment. You know what I mean? But
rock on.
But at the time of the film's release, it was not so well received. The film was actually nominated for 5 Razzie Awards.
Yeah.
Now, some people take that dubious distinction in stride, even appearing at the ceremony to accept their award. What was your reaction to being nominated for a Razzie?
I was upset. you know, first of all, I mentioned earlier that there were things that I cut out of the movie got put back in. And so I was kind of upset about that. And, you know, I had aspirations to do things that I considered to be more serious than Roadhouse. And of course, what I got offered, you know, were more movies like Roadhouse, because they think that's what you do, you know. So yeah, you know, Gene Shalit called it Outhouse, you know, because of the language, and you know, it was violent. You know, there was no shooting until the end, but that was bloody. So yeah, I was, you know, it hurt my feelings. You know, you think of yourself as somebody that aspires to do good work, and you know, when you get this, you know, just avalanche of criticism about it, it made me not want to ever have anything to do with the movie. You know, it isn't until a few years ago, I think, that I made peace with it, because it just wouldn't go away. And you know, and then you see, I don't know if you've seen, you know, this scene in the restaurant with Bill Murray, where he tells the story about calling up Kelly Lynch's husband
every time he sees it on television. Yeah.
You know, and they're both saying, you know, Bourdain's saying it's pretty much a perfect movie. And I'm thinking, Anthony Bourdain, you know, who I watch his show, you know, I think he's so smart. He's telling me this is pretty much a perfect movie. And I'm going, oh God. You know? And Bill Murray, nobody likes Roadhouse more than I do. And then he tells the story about calling up and telling Kelly's husband, I don't know if you know this, but your wife is being slammed up against the wall by Patrick Swayze.
Yeah.
And you know, the fact that it has such legs. We had a 30th anniversary screening at the Egyptian in Hollywood, and the place was packed. And I was there with Dean Cundy, who was the cameraman, and Tim Moore, who was the executive producer. Joel didn't make it. Kelly was there. Sam was on. He had been nominated for an Oscar, so he was off doing some other stuff, I guess. But they knew every line. You know, it was really a hoot. So, you know, things are what they are.
It stood the test of time. It's a movie, like you said, that's constantly on television. People love it. And you know what's funny is, like, I was going to ask you, do you, and then I'll segue into something else. Do you read your own reviews?
Not too much. You know, Paul Newman suggested that if you're going to look at reviews, read the good ones. Mm-hmm. He said, because even in the good ones, they're going to tell you some things that they didn't like. But at least you're hearing that from somebody that's sympathetic to the work.
Yeah.
I thought that was good. So for the most part, if I see what direction it's going that they didn't like it, I'll skip it. Mm-hmm. You know, the fact of the matter is, when you make a motion picture, the studio movies that I did, I don't have control of at the end. You know, the studio decides the cut. And unless you're in a situation like a Spielberg or somebody that, you know, can command final cut, Tarantino, I'm sure, and, you know, I mean, guys like that, nobody's going to mess with them. They're going to put out the movie that they wanted. I mean, even Gladiator had some things cut out that I was really disturbed about. Mm-hmm. So, you know, the independent films, for the most part, I can't complain about the cut, because at that point in time, I just would stand the producer down if we had a disagreement and say, no, I'm not changing that. And when you do that, criticism doesn't matter. You know, you can only put on the screen what you think works. And if somebody doesn't like it, then, you know, it's going to happen no matter what you do. Some people aren't going to like it. If you change it trying to please the audience and then find out that it didn't work, it's horrible. So it's about sticking to your guns.
Mm-hmm.
you know.
Well, and what's interesting is like you see today with Rotten Tomatoes, you'll have a movie that has a critic score of a 15 and an audience score of an 85 or a 90. So I mean, there's definitely what the critics want is one thing, what the audience wants is another, and occasionally they mesh, but most of the time it seems like they don't.
Well, that's true. And, you know, it's not easy to please the audience. That's for sure. And, you know, I mean, that's the goal. The goal is to communicate, you know, and entertain. And, you know, you do the best you can. And, you know, some people, you know, will get behind you and some people will go, oh, that was kind of boring, you know. You know, when I realized how to deal with criticism was in Jack's back. I read one criticism that said, I knew who the killer was in the first 5 minutes. The other one said, the killer came out of nowhere. You know, I went, okay, what are you going to do?
Yeah. You mentioned the great Dean Cundey a few minutes ago, and of course, Dean Cundey worked with John Carpenter on a lot of stuff. I remember an interview with John Carpenter in which he was talking about the first time he really felt like a film director, and it was on the set of Halloween, which was his second feature film, third if you count Dark Star. Did you have a moment like that on the set of either Jack's Back or Roadhouse or Gladiator, where in which you felt like, hey, I'm directing a movie over here?
Yeah. The first shots we did on Jack's Back was a big crane shot of the homeless camp. And we could only afford a crane one day. So we did 3 crane shots that day. But we moved from the homeless camp, which was a real deal there, you know, and we got permission to shoot it. We moved into an apartment house to do an interior where Jack, who works at the clinic, goes and knocks on the door, and Denitsa opens the door and he says, I can give you an abortion. And so we're in a cramped hallway. The camera's all the way up against the wall and I'm underneath it. And they put the slate out and it had my name on it. And when they clapped it, I took a moment. I went, man, that's been an interesting walk. Action.
Very cool. Very, very cool.
But, you know, I worked with Dean. I was on his crew as an electrician on a movie with Jack Palance, which was very much like Predator. It was the same story. It was a monster, an alien that came down to hunt people. And, you know, Palance's famous line was, he don't know it, but I'm hunting him. Jack was a hoot.
In 1990, you directed an episode of Tales from the Crypt entitled Corman's Calamity, which reunited you with Cynthia Gibb. Yeah. I loved Tales from the Crypt growing up. What was that experience like?
Oh, it was really fun. You know, the script was Shane Black's brother wrote it, and it was funny. And, you know, I mean, I got to do something that I had never done. And we got Harry Anderson. He was fabulous. I already knew Cindy, you know, and she was great. And, Goldwyn's wife. Oh,
I can't think of the actress's name.
She was fabulous. And, you know, so we had a ball. And I had just sold the screenplay, Three Rivers, which became Striking Distance, to Columbia. And we got Robert De Niro attached. And he came to visit me on the set. So my stature among the crew kind of went through the... And anyway, that was a pretty cool day. And, you know, we had a lot of fun doing it. And my friend Pat Buba edited it for me. And he's a Pittsburgh guy who has passed on, sadly. Love him dearly.
Yeah, great.
Very, very talented man.
Yeah, great editor. Worked a lot with George Romero. He edited A Day of the Dead. Really, really talented guy.
Yes.
Gladiator, for a lack of a better word, is a badass movie. And what a cast. Robert Loggia, Brian Dennehy, Ossie Davis, John Hurd, Cuba Gooding Jr., James Marshall. Wow, just phenomenal. Were you a fan of boxing prior to making Gladiator?
Yes, and I still am. I mean, I watch boxing all the time. I grew up with my father. We watched Gillette Friday Night Fights all the time. And, what happened in the interim between Roadhouse and Gladiator is that I decided that I was going to write something that I wanted to do.
Mm.
As I got offered a couple of different. I got offered. Joel wanted me to do Ford Fairlane, and I turned it down. I mean, it was vulgar. I was like, I'm not doing another one of these.
Mm-hmm.
So I wrote the script for Three Rivers, which my log line was 1 killer, 2 cops, 3 rivers, and of course they went in a different direction. And I worked with Bob De Niro for 3 months on the script, and his take was it's a dark drama about a family of alcoholic cops. And he said to me, Rowdy, at the end of the movie, why you got to chase this guy? You know who the killer is. Why you got to chase him? So he said, Midnight Run would have been a great movie if they took some of that action out of there. What do you need that for? Well, the studio hated the script.
Mm.
So Bob gave me a hug and he said, get Mel. Oh, shit. So my agent represented Bruce Willis. So the next thing I know, Bruce Willis is interested in doing the movie, and the studio says yes. So I got to meet him. I'm living out in Malibu, and I go to the Wolfgang Puck restaurant. I made him when he walked in, and I just looked at him. I went, "Ooh, guy's a movie star."
Mm-hmm.
No doubt about it. And the first thing he said to me was, Rowdy, a lot of people say I'm hard to work with. It's just not true. Well, it is true. He posed as a prick. And, I tell him to his face. So, but anyway, he gets attached, but he's not available for 18 months. So I start writing. My friend Greg Taylor, who wrote the script for Jumanji,
mm-hmm.
and a wonderful movie, Prancer. Greg and I were in English together, English class, English 1, freshman year at Penn State. And we met up again in LA. Anyway, he called me up. He said, I got an idea for a movie, but it's more your genre than mine. Would you work with me on it? So we're working on this movie. We're writing, and we get pretty much almost done. And Columbia sends me Gladiator script. And I'm thinking, this makes a lot of sense. I'm attached to this movie they're going to do with Bruce. And in the meantime, they've got this movie that they want to go, and there's plenty of time in between. So they're going to throw me this picture. So I read the script, and there's a lot I really like about it. And so I go to the meeting with Frank Price, Michael Nathanson. And, I told my wife before I went in what I was going to tell him, about the script. And she said, well, I don't think that works. And I was like, oh, geez. Thinking, I get into the meeting, and the first thing they ask me is, what do you think of the script? And I said, I really like the script. This character, Tommy, when he knocks the referee out, you're with him for the rest of the movie, And Frank looked at me and he said, what don't you like? And I said, the ending. In the original script, Tommy gets in the ring to fight Lincoln and knocks him out. After not wanting to fight him, he just, out of a reaction, punches him in the head. We don't know if Lincoln lives or dies. Oh. And then he goes up into the office and he fights Horn and knocks him out the window and kills him. I said, that doesn't work. I said, in a coming of age story, you give the boy or the girl a problem they can't solve. And they finally do. And when they do, that's the transition from child to adult. And I said, so they said, well, what would you do? And I said, well, Tommy can't hit Lincoln. He gets into the ring and, Lincoln wants to fight. Cuba's telling him, fight me, And he said, you want the money? Knock me out. We're slaves. Horn is getting the money. And now we've given the problem to Lincoln. So Lincoln has to make a moral choice. And he makes the right choice by not fighting. And that elevates his character. And so Michael Nathanson said, well, then who's going to knock Lincoln out? And of course, I had not thought about that. But there's a bad guy in the movie.
Mm-hmm.
Horn. He gets into the ring and he says, get in there and kick his ass. And Lincoln says, I'm not fighting for you no more. And I looked at Frank and I said, and then we've gone from slavery to freedom. And he got this smile on his face. I thought, oh, I got this job. So I worked with Nick Kazan, and Nick didn't end up getting credit. I mean, he wrote the whole goddamn movie from what I saw.
Oh.
You know, there were 2 drafts before, and the Writers Guild is real tough about protecting the first writers. So anyway, that's just the way it went. And anyway, he wrote the ending that, you know, I had dictated, and we went off to make it. And, you know, the same story about Cuba as with the Roadhouse story with me and with Sam is that Cuba turned it down. And I got him to come down to have lunch with me. And I told him what I was going to do and why I needed him to be in the movie. And I talked him into it. So, you know, you don't take no for an answer.
No, and I'm glad you did. He's phenomenal in Gladiator.
Yeah,
What
worked together a bunch, and we're very good friends and in touch to this day.
That's great. What sort of preparation did you ask James in Cuba to endure?
God, trained like crazy. I mean, they did this boxing. It was Jimmy Nickerson and Benny the Jet again. So I got Benny back, and you know, I mean, they worked these kids like crazy. And you know, the truth of the matter is, in stage fighting, you're not connecting ever. I mean, sometimes in the body, and you pull the punch, and sometimes not so well. Some oof. But if you're ever in a fight and you're swinging at somebody and you miss, it takes more effort than when you hit them. So when we were shooting these fights, and sometimes they would go on for hours, these guys could barely lift their arms. You know, they were all young and in great shape, and they were tearing Chicago up. You know, they were out at night. These boys were all being bad. I was getting calls, you know, it's like, oh my God, they're talking about loud sex from this apartment building where they're all standing, you know, somebody left the bathtub on, and oh God.
Incorrigible kids.
You know, youth.
Yeah, there you go. The fight scenes in Gladiator are really physical and brutal. Were there any? You're talking about? You mentioned you pull your punches or you miss, but it seemed like a lot of it was they were really tight. Did anybody land any live rounds while they were?
Not so much. No, I mean there were a few, but nothing like you know, in Roadhouse that happened a bit. You know, even in the major fight that we filmed, one time Patrick took it pretty hard in the gut, and we had to stop for a bit. Plus, you know, drain his knee. You know, oh my God,
yeah.
He was a trooper. And you know, I had to beg him. Well, actually, I didn't. I begged him, and then I told him no. He wanted to do the bulldog, which is where you jump and knock the guy off the motorcycle. He wanted to do that. I said, no, you're not doing it. You know, I made the stunt man do it.
It's something that he still wanted to do it, man.
I mean, you saw, you know, Point Break. He jumped out of those airplanes and did all that crazy shit.
Yeah.
I mean, he was a stud.
Cuba Gooding Jr., who went on, of course, to become Oscar winner, Cuba Gooding Jr., and you worked together again a few years later. When it comes to Cuba Gooding Jr. and James Spader, actors that you choose to work with again and again, do you feel like the actors, is it just because they're easy to work with, or do you feel that them as actors up your game as a director? They make you a better director?
I think it's all the above, Jason. You know, you have a relationship with an actor, and you have a really good relationship, and there's trust. There's nothing you can't do. And they're both very talented. And, you know, it's a funny story. Cuba came to see me at my house in Malibu, and I had just finished that script. And it was on my desk. And he came in and he said, "What's that?" I said, oh, well, I just wrote this script. He said, can I see it? And, I didn't think of Cuba when I wrote the script. I was thinking of somebody like Alec Baldwin or Jimmy,
Mhm.
And he had just won the Oscar. 1:00 in the morning, my phone rings, and it's Cuba. And he said, Rowdy, I want to make this movie. I said, Cuba, it's 1:00. He said, yeah, I'm going up in the morning. So he came over and we talked about it, and he said, I'll find the money. And he did. So off we went rejoicing.
That's awesome. You touched on striking distance a little bit earlier. You mentioned that Robert De Niro was almost cast in the lead. I also heard that another Pittsburgh guy, Ed Harris, was almost.
Ed Harris was who I had imagined in the role when I wrote it, and he was represented by my agent as well. But The Abyss didn't do. I guess it didn't do the business they wanted, or for whatever reason. I said, I'd like to meet Ed, and they said, well, first it went to Bob, and I was surprised by that, but it was partly the relationship between the producer and De Niro. They had worked together before, and so he said, Bob, take a look at this script. And when De Niro came to see me at the set for Tales from the Crypt, we went in the cafeteria and I asked him, well, what did you think of the script? And he sat there for a little while and he said, I like the drinking part. I said, you like the drinking part? And then he did the scene where this guy is trying to decide whether he's going to fall off the wagon and take this drink. And I'm watching him. It was phenomenal. It was phenomenal.
He's a great actor.
Great
actor.
Yeah, like I said, he gave me a hug, and that was one of the highlights of my career.
Nice. You actually said it earlier during the stream, and I've heard you say it in the past in an interview, that making a movie is like going to war.
Yeah.
How much of a war was the making of Striking Distance?
It was awful. So here's what happened. I told you I was writing that script with Greg Taylor. Well, we sold it to Columbia for a lot of money. This is before I started shooting Striking Distance, Gladiator. Mm-hmm. Gladiator came out. We tested through the roof. Frank Price got fired, and they brought in. I probably won't remember his name because I hate him. Mark Canton. Mark Canton had worked with the guys that were running the studio on Batman, Goober and Peters.
Yeah.
So they put him in charge of the studio. So we've already tested 92. And they tell me they want me to come over to the Thalberg building to talk to Mark Canton. He's going to watch the movie. So I'm sitting with the producer in the basement where the screening rooms are, the Thalberg, and they've come out. It's Nathanson, Mark Canton, and Barry Josephson. They've watched the movie, and they walk right by. Mark Canton doesn't say hello, doesn't introduce himself. Then he stops, turns around, and he comes back. And I thought, oh, well, he probably didn't realize that it was us. And he looks at me and he says, that fight with Shortcut was not very satisfying. And I said, it wasn't meant to be. And he walked away. And that was my relationship with this guy. He called me up when we got to Pittsburgh. Bruce Willis had gotten the Robert De Niro script. Must have been from my agent, his agent. And he was putting these scenes from the Robert De Niro script into the script that the studio finally approved, which was a Bruce Willis movie with action and jokes. He wants to be, the De Niro character as portrayed in that script. Now, the studio doesn't want that. But when I try to tell him that, he calls the studio and they said, we'll shoot it both ways. He had his high school buddy plugging these scenes in and making up new stuff. It was awful. It was an awful experience. He was not, he wouldn't take direction. And, it was the very best experience I've had as a director on one level. And that is, no sailor ever learned his craft on a calm sea. So I learned more on that movie about what I shouldn't do. I mean, I tried to coddle him. I tried to befriend him. I tried to keep the set smooth. I tried to be nice. And about halfway through, I realized that's not working. And so I just dug my heels in. And at that point, it was just battling back and forth to finish the picture. And, it's my least favorite movie. I learned a lot about screenwriting. I learned a lot about what the studio will do to your work, based on their idea of what makes an action movie work. It was a turning point in my career in a big way. My lawyer represented Bruce Willis. My agent represented Bruce Willis. And when I went up against Bruce Willis, I had no support. Frank Price was gone. Frank, who had given me a 3-picture deal. So I moved on from those guys. And from then on, I did independent films. Mm-hmm. I think it damaged my relationship with studios, because that movie they knew there was trouble on the movie. But, I'd like to know, if you ask any director that's worked with Bruce Willis and any, get an honest answer out of him, whether he had a good time. It'll be few and far between, in my opinion.
Yeah, I've heard other directors describe their relationship with Bruce Willis, and it's never a positive one.
So. Yeah, he lives, he's made a lot of money, and I'm sure he's happy about that. It certainly mattered to him.
Do you realize you're in a troubled production while it's going on? You said that you did a few things to try and right the ship, but when you said you dug your heels in, was there at that point were you like, okay, I'm just going to make the best movie that I can and screw everything else?
Right.
Or
refusing to do these scenes that they wanted me to do? And like I said, the studio sent Barry Josephson out, and that was when they told me start shooting things both ways. I said, it's your money. Stupid.
Yeah. What were some of the other pressures of having to? I mean, you've got a
$1 million movie.
Yeah. It's a big budget movie. It's a studio movie with an A-list leading man actor.
Right.
There had to be a lot of pressure on you to return a movie that's going to, make a certain profit based on its budget and the fact that you've got Bruce Willis in the lead.
Right. And, the fact of the matter is the movie is in profit, although, they never paid me my back end. But, the head of Columbia told me years later that movie was in profit. And of course, it plays a lot on cable. And I still, I get a residual check and I say, God bless that prick.
Well, on Striking Distance, this may be the one positive thing. On Striking Distance, you did get to work with one of my favorite actors, Tom Atkins. What was Tom Atkins like to work with?
Sweetheart. Yeah, we had a very good time. He's from Pittsburgh, and I mean, that group, I had a lot of crew from Pittsburgh, so it was embarrassing to have so much trouble on the set and to have, an actor who won't listen to you,
Yeah.
I didn't know as much about the craft as I learned from that movie. The truth of the matter is that it's like fighting with dogs. You got to win the first one. If you don't win the first one, you get walked on. And, I learned that in a big way because, as I said, I tried to be friendly. I tried to accommodate. And that was not the right one. That was not the right move. The right move would have been to, I tell you what, call the studio, tell them that you don't want to work with me, that you don't trust me, and tell them to get somebody else down here. In the meantime, I'll be in my motorhome. Let me know how it goes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That was the answer. And of course, I realized that too late. But again, how do you know until you get in a situation where things are bad?
Exactly.
You know, so it was seminal, and like I said, it was the most important movie in that way for me by a long shot.
Mm-hmm. What about the rest of the cast? Because there was a great cast in Striking Distance, aside from.
Oh yeah, everything was great. You know, and I mean, they were all like walking on eggshells. And you know, I can tell you that I don't think that Sarah Jessica was all that enamored. You know, he's not that pleasant a character.
Mm. You know, every filmmaker's career has its ups and downs. How did you deal with Striking Distance not being successful critically or commercially? And do you kind of touched on that you thought maybe it affected it had a negative impact on you working with the studios?
Yeah, without question. Pardon me. Yeah. So, you know, I just started writing. I got a frog in my throat now. Excuse me. And I ended up doing some good work, you know. Murder of Crows.
Mm-hmm.
Let me get a drink of water. I'll be right back.
Sure. Al, I see you say that you must have seen 20 Friday the 13th unboxings today on YouTube. I'll have mine out tomorrow. So maybe mine will be 21.
That's better.
It was all that you know, reflux you were having from talking about your experience on Striking Distance.
Yeah, that sucked.
Did you, what is it? Because I mean, you always hear like, oh, you know, well, this person's movie underperformed, they're kind of damaged goods. Let's move away. They're a good filmmaker, but their last movie didn't do well, so let's not touch them. Did you feel anything like that coming off of Striking Distance?
Yeah, you know, I mean, I left my agent and my lawyer, and they were both big, you know, big characters. So it was a while, you know, and actually Cuba, because he won the Oscar, was able to get me back on the floor.
With the Murder of Crows?
Murder of Crows, yeah. And, you know,
that's another really, I think that's a really well done thriller that kind of flies under the radar. Also Gladiator. If you guys have not seen Gladiator, go watch Gladiator. But yeah, I really like A Murder of Crows also, and I actually rewatched it just the other night, and I really like that movie. I think it's a really solid thriller. And my question to you was, how pivotal was Cuba Gooding Jr., because he's the star and the producer of the film? How pivotal was he in getting that film made?
Well, you know, essentially, he was the one that went and found the money. So it was all him. And, you know, that script, the original idea for that script was called Bestseller. And it was actually the very first script I attempted. And I worked on a documentary while I was in D.C. about the King exhibit was in the National Gallery. So we went in at night, filmed it. You know, there were lines around the block, you know, to try to get in to see this. And we were in there all night for a week with all these exhibits, which was phenomenal. But the director of that got nominated for Best Documentary Short and came out to LA. And when they interviewed him, he gave him the script that I wrote for Bestseller. It was CAA agency. And I was already living in Los Angeles by then. I had moved out there, and I got this call from this agent at CAA saying, I read your script. And I said, my script? She said, yeah, Bestseller. I said, wow, well, how'd you get it? And she said, Jim Messenger gave it to me. And I went, oh. And she said, you know, I loved it. I want to read everything you've written. And I said, you have. And anyway, she didn't sell it. And finally, she called me and said, listen, you're not a good enough writer yet. Put this away and, you know, come back to it sometime. And I was kind of pissed, you know, because first of all, I was hopeful. Oh my God, you know, I've just been here a couple of months, and you know. Anyway, it was after striking distance. You know, I'm looking at my shelf and I see this old script bestseller, and I go, oh. And the OJ trial was going on. And I started thinking about lawyers. And so I reframed it, and it became A Murder of Crows. And yeah, again, yes, Cuba was essential. You know, I mean, having won the Oscar, he was able to raise the money through an independent producer, Ely Samaha. And, you know, we went and made the picture.
What is your writing process like?
It's work. You know, I come into my office, you see where I'm sitting, and every day I write. And, you know, there's some, you can't teach writing on a certain level. I mean, you can study structure. I have. You can study work habits. But it's about getting your ass in the seat and trying to sort it out. And for me, it's all about your outline. You have to outline the movie. It's written backwards. You have to know what the ending of the story is before you start. And you work back from there because you know where you're going. And Kurt Vonnegut said there are two kinds of writers, bashers and swoopers. Bashers, they start on page 1, they get to page 3, they go back to page 1, they get to page 5, they go back to page 4, they go to page 10, they go back to page 8, back and forth until it's right. Swoopers start, excuse me, start at page 1, go to page 120, then go back to page 1. I never thought that was a good idea. The problem is, you make a mistake on page 50, from page 50 to 120, you might have trash. So anyway, I'm a basher. And, you know, I heard I watched this Hollywood Reporter interview, and one of the TV writers was talking about writer's block. He said, no, I don't get writer's block. He said, the bus drivers get bus driver block? No, you show up for work, you do your work, you know. And, you know, do you write yourself into a corner sometimes? Yeah. You know, and like I said, you know, about trying to find that one line. Sometimes it's trying to find that one scenario that gets you out of the shit. But, you know, good stories, they pretty much write themselves. You know, what's really wonderful, Jason, is when the characters start talking and you're just writing it down. You know, they take over and they're just, you know, and then you read it and you go,
You become the stenographer, just recording everything.
You're a vessel. Yeah. That's a really great feeling.
Have you ever had one of those moments where a character does something that surprises even you?
Yes. Yes. And, you know, Murder of Crows is a great example because that final shootout, you know, that, you know, when I was writing that, it just kind of happened and I went, holy shit. And I was, you know, and it's a big surprise in the movie.
It is a big surprise. And even though I'd seen the film a couple of times before, when I revisited it the other night, it was still a surprise.
Right. Berenger gets it. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And another, I mean, you've worked with some incredible actors. In the case of Murder of Crows, I mean, you've got Tom Berenger in there. You've got Ashley Lawrence from Hellraiser, which a lot of my audience is very familiar with. Eric Stoltz, of course. So do you think...
I got Eric. Actually, he's a friend. And, you know, Jimmy told him, you definitely want to work with Rowdy. So that was nice.
Do you think it's the power of your script that really attracts, you know, these kinds of actors?
Yeah, there's 3 ways to get an actor into a movie. You bribe them so they get a lot of money. You give them a really great script, or you give them a location that they just really want to go to. If you can get 2 out of 3, you'll nail them in a second. So if it's a good script and a great location, but the money's not so great, they'll still do it. If it's great money and a great script, but they got to go to the desert, they'll still do it.
What Murder of Crows seemed like a really ambitious film, because the movie moves from like Louisiana to Florida. There's a lot of like actual locations instead of sets.
Yes.
Was that did you run into any issues with, as far as budget and schedule, with how ambitious you wanted the film to be?
Yeah, that's why I say making a movie is a war. Yeah, because I think we had $7 million, and we started in Key West, and then we went to New Orleans, and then we went back to Los Angeles to do as many of the interiors as we could. And I think we had 34 days. As far as I'm concerned, I don't consider the budget as much as I consider how many days do I have to shoot. Because that determines how much coverage you can do and how much time you can spend on individual scenes. So that's what's really important. Because I came up through the ranks on movies that didn't have long schedules, I prepare everything. So I shot list the entire movie. And it was funny, when I did Gladiator, I had Tak Fujimoto was my cameraman, who's brilliant. And the first day, we're outside in Chicago, and it's like with wind chill 30 below. And this is the scene where Tommy's walking to school and he shoots the basketball. And I said to Tak, I want to do a little crane shot here as he walks by, come off the rim and down. And he said, no. I said, excuse me? He said, no. And when Tak didn't want to do something, he'd go like this, hold his nose, I said, Tak, no. And he wouldn't budge. And I'm looking at the clock. I got a big day. My first day. I don't want to go in the toilet. And I said, well, what are we going to do? And he said, well, bring the dolly over. So we do this little dolly shot. And I'm hot. And we get inside. And, for the first time, I recognized my crew because everybody had these giant parkas on, We get into the cafeteria in the school. And I got my notebook, and it's got every shot in the movie. And Tak's looking over my shoulder, and I look up at him, and he said, what am I supposed to do? Think about it. So I staged the scene, and I looked over at Tak, and I said, Tak, and he said, we're here. Camera's here. And that's the way it went the rest of the movie. I had to beg him for close-ups. Can I have one of these? I said, just one. Ah. It's fabulous.
I would also highly recommend everybody to go out and seek out A Murder of Crows. It's a really good little thriller. Great cast, lots of twists and turns. I really enjoy it. In 2002, you reteamed with James Spader for The Stick-Up, another criminally overlooked film, in my opinion. And actually, you did back-to-back films with Spader, Eyewitness and The Stick-Up. You kind of came full circle at that point. How do you think you had evolved as a filmmaker from your first film, Jack's Back with Spader, to Eyewitness and The Stick-Up with Spader?
Well, I think I stated earlier when I walked on the set of Jack's Back that I was pretty confident. So I never felt, I guess, my confidence was shaken a bit on Striking Distance because it didn't go well. But again, when you've written the script and you're working with people that you have respect for and who have respect for you, it's going to go well. If you like the material, and I love that script. I wrote that script in 3 weeks. I was inspired. I didn't want to do another murder story. I was just, it's dark. I don't want to go there. It's just, dark and, trying to figure out ways to kill people and that, and get away with it or whatever. I thought, bank robbery, man. Everybody wants a bag of money. Let's do a bank robbery movie. And I'm sitting in my chair and I'm looking at the computer and I get this idea. Here's this guy in a car and he's got a bag of money and a shotgun sawed off and a clown mask and the cops are chasing him. But what if he didn't do it?
Mm.
And then the rest of it wrote itself. It really did. I mean, it just, I figured out, well, if he didn't do it, who did it? Well, you watch the movie, you'll see.
Very good movie, by the way, The Stick Up. I really enjoyed that film.
Well, we had great cast again. John Livingston was terrific. John and I are still friends. And Jimmy, and he met Leslie on that movie, and they're still together.
Oh, very cool.
When my agent gave that script to Promark, and they said they wanted to make it. And, again, this was low budget. I think we had $4 or $5 million. They said, who would you like to get? And I said, Spader. They said, we would definitely work with Spader. So I called him up and I said, Jimmy, I got another script. I got this deal at this company and they'll work with you. And would you read it? He said, absolutely. He said, bring it to the Beverly Hills Hotel. I'm registered under the name Jack somebody, I said, Jimmy, you live in Beverly Hills? He said, yeah. I went, oh. So I bring it to the desk, and that night he called me. He said, I like this guy, Rowdy. And he said, tell him I want $1 million in a Porsche. I said, in a Porsche? I said, yeah, can't they just give you like another 70 grand or something? He said, no, $1 million in a Porsche. So they did.
Hey, $1 million in a Porsche, not a bad deal for, not a bad deal.
Yeah.
How's the film industry changed over the years, do you think? And has it changed for the better or for the worse?
Oh, it's still changing. I mean, like we're in a sea change right now. Mm-hmm. We cut Jack's back on a moviola. Okay, so that's an upright machine with a screen about this big. And you step on the pedals, and you have a bin with trims in it that are pieces of the scene that you take out. You try this piece, try that piece. The big change came when we got computer editing and everything. You digitize the film, and then it was all on the computer screen, and you could work much faster. I mean, it was incredible, the change. So you have more flexibility, more freedom to try things. So moving from the analog world to the digital world was the big change. Now we're moving from a theatrical paradigm to a streaming paradigm. Regal Cinema just announced they're closing. That's 40,000 jobs. All the agencies in Hollywood are having shakeups. They fired all kinds of people. Same with the studios. It's a new deal. It's crazy. Mm-hmm. But content is still king. They have to have new content. Right now, it's really problematic because of COVID. How are you going to work?
Yeah.
Tim Moore is in New Mexico right now with Clint, and they're going to shoot. So there's certain protocols that they have to follow that are going to be. It's going to be expensive. They're talking about it adds $500,000 to the budget minimum in order to accomplish all this stuff with the testing, and there's different zones that you're in, and never the twain shall meet. Like the guys go into like the set and then they have to get out, and the actors come in, and the people that work with the actors are in zone one, and it's going to be crazy for a while.
Yeah. Do you think a movie like Jack's Back or Roadhouse could get made today the same way that they were made in 87 and 88 or 88 and 89?
Certainly Jack's Back, because it was made for a song. There are people out there still, that are finding ways to get movies made, with a little bit of money. Roadhouse was a studio movie, and, I think that those kinds of movies would be tougher to make. I think the studios are only going to be interested in the tentpole, the big productions. Like Marvel's going to keep working. Mm-hmm. And I guess they're doing Justice League at Warner Brothers. Although, they haven't been that successful, not nearly as good as the Marvel movies. So it remains to be seen if that has legs.
Yeah. Well, filmmakers like David Lynch and John Waters not long ago have based, I remember them saying something like, filmmakers like us who work on sort of the small to medium sized budgets, studios don't want to make those movies anymore. Even the independent studios nowadays don't want to make those movies anymore. Everybody wants to dump a ton of money into a project and just hope for a huge return.
Right. Well, I saw a change there too, about in the middle of my career, where the independent studios all got bought up by the major studios. You get a movie like Platoon. It's made by, I think it was Hemdale. Independent picture, and it makes a fortune. Well, Wall Street calls up the studios and says, guys, you can't be making these movies that are outside our revenue stream. Buy them, get them, and of course, I don't necessarily believe that was a good thing. Some of the independent producers were really smart and interesting guys that made interesting pictures.
Yeah, speaking of one, Ed Feldman actually passed away, I think yesterday or the day before. Longtime independent producer behind like The Hitcher, Near Dark, a lot of really interesting projects.
Yeah, it's a different world, but every major outlet, and by that I mean even phone companies, Verizon is going to have a streaming service before it's over.
Yeah,
AT&T bought Warner Brothers and HBO, and Disney Plus and Hulu, and some of these are going to get morphed together. Netflix blew up the whole world. They blew up Hollywood.
Do you see the Hollywood system as far as, like, we're here in the pandemic and we're seeing a lot of movies now are getting theatrical releases that would never get theatrical releases if it weren't for the pandemic, and a lot of in the streaming service is really taking off now. Theaters are closing down. Do you see like a changing of the guard? Do you see movie theaters going the way of the gun in the future?
When television came in, they said it was going to be the end of theater. And it was going to hurt movies. Well, it didn't hurt movies. And, it changed radio. Radio went in a different day, but radio didn't go away. I think there's going to be a theatrical business, but it's going to morph. And, it's anybody's guess whether it becomes like it was or is a new paradigm. One thing is certain, is that good product will find a way. When you got something that, really works and you have the right people behind it, because God knows there've been some great movies that never got the market place, representation that they deserved. But the fact of the matter is that if it's good, more than likely it's going to find a way. But I think without question that the streaming world for the near future is going to be where you have to deal.
Because there were so many movies that were scheduled for this year, they've just postponed them, hoping that next year will be better.
There'll be an audience. Yeah, right now nobody will go. I mean, some people will that are movie buffs, but the general audience is going to say, I'll wait till it's on Netflix. I've got a 70-inch TV in my living room, with surround sound, and my wife makes good popcorn. I don't have to pay $10 for a soda, So, things have changed. The great TV's definitely made a difference. The interesting part for me is that there's a lot of, I'm really interested in, at this point in time, developing more long form. I've written a couple books now, and I got a book out called Father Christmas, which came out right at Christmas last year. So we're hoping it was a little late for the market. We're hoping to do better business this coming holiday. Let me plug my book. Where is it?
Yeah, please do. I just wrote it down. Yeah, Father Christmas.
Father
Cool.
Christmas. Yeah, it's a true story about my mother. Grew up in a coal mining town, and it's a Christmas story. Obviously, I'm very proud of it. I won an award, actually, Reader's Favorite Award for Child Coming of Age Story.
Wow, that's awesome! Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, no, it feels really good. But I have recently taken some scripts, because I write a lot, and I have scripts that I really like that I never found an audience for or a buyer for, and some of them I have taken to think about them as series, either limited or ongoing, depending on what the idea is.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been pretty interesting. I kind of like bust the script in half for a pilot. So like the first 50 or 60 pages, and I have to make sure that it works in that way that sends the story off into what can be a much longer form. So I've been working on those things. I've got a number of things in the works.
That's very cool.
I'm hoping to get an offer to Brie Larson on a picture that I wrote called Pieces of Eight, which it's a treasure hunting movie. And I read on the internet that she'd been certified as a diver. So I thought, man, this is a slam dunk. Mm. So Tim Moore is producing for me. And again, this would be number 6 or so. So we're trying to get to Brie. So
you've got books in the work. You've got series you're working on. And you've got film that you're working on.
Yes. I wrote with a friend of mine an interactive screenplay. It's called The Unseen. And it's a story about a prison in Alaska. And it's a federal prison full of very bad people. And there's a 9.2 earthquake that busts it open. Mm. And pretty much a war starts. And then something terrible comes out of the crack. Mm. And this is, it's a horror picture. I think it'll be up your alley, Jason. Mm. And there are 8 endings. There are 42 choices between 102 minutes and 110 minutes, depending on the choices you make, that take you in different directions. And there's a gentleman named Ted Shilowitz, who's the futurist at Paramount. And Ted and I have come together we're going to co-direct. Ted is like way into the whole gaming and all the new technology, the Unreal Engine. Mm-hmm. So he's a perfect partner for me because I've not worked with any of that. But that also is expensive. Mm-hmm. And, I have a lot of experience with practical sets, which will help us in that way. Also, it's a perfect idea for streamers because, the company we worked with that gave us the software for writing the screenplay as an interactive is called Control Movie. And they developed this software, and they did a movie called The Late Shift, where they had a theatrical release. People would go in, and there was an app on their phone, and when a choice came for characters to make, your phone lights up, and you push the button A or B, yes or no, whatever. Mm-hmm. My feeling about that is that I think it's less interesting for the viewer than watching it at home and being able to determine every one of the choices yourself. Because in the theater, it's democracy, majority rules. Mm-hmm. But the good news is that Paramount invested in them, and Ted is at Paramount, so ICM is going to send our script over. As a matter of fact, we just gave it to ICM, and we'll see how we do. So it's constantly, you're throwing stuff against the wall and seeing if it sticks. Mm-hmm.
Well, it sounds like
I've got that. I've written a book and an animated feature.
Wow.
that, you might not think of me as that writer, but it's really fun. It's kind of it's the ugly duckling in a sense. It's in Australia, and it's about an emu. And emu egg gets stolen by a flying fox. He drops it in the river. It goes over the falls, and a nearsighted platypus puts it in a crane nest. And the cranes raise this monstrosity, and they have to migrate. M Day comes, and he can't fly. So they fly off, and he's going to follow them, and he goes on this walkabout, ends up with a partner as a wombat, and then a female Tasmanian devil that's albino. And it's a coming-of-age story where he figures out who he is. So right now we're feeling good about that because animation is COVID-proof. And I've got Barry Cook as the director. Barry directed the Disney movie Milan. He did Arthur Christmas. He did Walking with Dinosaurs. And, we've got a bunch of people that are ex-Disney people involved, and so we're pitching it.
It's very cool. I'm glad that you've stayed busy. You've got so many. Seems like you've got so many irons in the fire. I mean, that's really cool.
A lot of ghostwriting too. I've done a bunch of scripts. Writer for hire. And a lot of times, you do a polish or a rewrite, and if you don't change 30% of it, you're not going to get screen credit. So there's a lot of those that have gone by. But I've been making a good living as a writer for quite a while. And I'm anxious to make a couple of pictures of the stories that I really like. But with streaming as well, with some of these ideas that I have for longer form, producing and writing, the writing is going to take up a lot of time. And, in television, producers have the power. And, you get directors in, and, if you like them, you keep them. And if you don't, you get somebody else. And essentially, you get to guide it as a producer. They're the bosses in television.
Do you have any words of any wise words that you'd be willing to impart on any up and coming filmmakers out there?
Yeah. Fortune favors the bold. That, and, I'll tell you a quick story. When I was doing Gladiator, I put a song in by LL Cool J when they introduced Black Death.
Mama said, knock you out.
Oh, I said, knock you out. I said, oh, this is really good. This is perfect. Well, the producer comes to me and he said, you can't have that song. I said, why? He said, well, they're not going to spend the money. I said, LL Cool J records for Columbia Records. He said, yeah. And I said, this is a Columbia movie. He said, yeah. I said, okay, take the money out of that pocket and put it in this pocket. He said, no, you can't have it. So I'm mixing the movie. I put the song in. And he said, what are you doing? I said, putting the song in. You can't do it. You can't have it. I said, it's in there. Well, we finish the reel. The door opens. Frank Price comes in, sits down. I said, play back. So we play the reel. We introduce Black Death. Mama said, knock you out. I'm going to knock you out. Finish the reel. Lights come up. Frank Price looks over at me and he said, see what you get when you stick to your guns? And he got up and left.
There you go. Very, very wise words. I've also noticed that you do music as well. You're quite a talented singer, and so you play guitar.
Yeah, that's a hobby. And when you're a writer, sometimes, you look for different forms. I've been playing guitar for a long time. I live in Montana now. We have a ranch, and it's pretty quiet up here. So I have a lot of time to do my work, and I have a whole little studio over here that, I don't know, I probably have 8 guitars and a Bose system for PA.
I keep mine nearby also.
Yeah, I see that. There'll be a day when we jam, Jason.
Oh, that'd be sweet. That'd be sweet. I I've got a couple of questions from our audience, and then we can wrap it up. Jamie says, "Hello, Mr. Harrington. I was wondering how you feel about the transference of physical media to the platform of streaming services over owning DVD or Blu-ray."
The main thing about the revenue stream, as far as I'm concerned, is that the big change with streaming is they buy out the movie.
Mm.
So, I have not experienced yet selling, for example, to Netflix to see what the final deal will look like. But my feeling is that for the most part, they're beating you out of the residuals at this point in time because everything is purchased upfront. That's all the money you're going to get. The Writers Guild and the Directors Guild, we're going to have something to say about that. But again, I haven't learned yet because I haven't had a contract with those guys to see, where it's going to land. But it's a very good question, and it's one I can bring up with both guilds, find out where we stand on that. Because without question, residuals are a wonderful bonus to your work, and because they are continuing to make money on your vision.
Mm.
So to get a piece of that is really important.
Are you familiar with the lawsuit between Sean S. Cunningham and Victor Miller over the rights to Friday the 13th that's going on right now?
No, I haven't heard about it.
Well, are you aware of the Writers Guild stipulation where after so many years a writer can reclaim their, like if I sold, do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I'm hoping to do that actually. I wrote a script that I sold to Warner Brothers that I would love to get back. I think it's a hit movie. The problem was that a movie came out with a very similar story that shelved us. It was the Keanu Reeves movie about the water engine.
What was that called? Was it Chill Factor?
No.
I can't remember.
It had Morgan Freeman and
yeah, gosh, I can't remember the name of that movie.
Yeah, I think my script is better, but unfortunately, it's a very similar story. Mine is about an anti-gravity device, and it's really fun. It's really fun.
Well, the thing about this lawsuit that's going to be interesting is because at this point, Victor Miller's pretty much won it. So he's looking at getting parts of ownership of Friday the 13th, and what parts I don't know, but it's going to be a messy situation. But a lot of people are wondering, okay, well, will studios or producers ever want to touch a spec script ever again? And how is this going to work when other writers from franchises are going to come and claim theirs? Because all of these franchises now are 40 plus years old or older.
Right.
So, but
nothing has changed. Content is king. So good stories are going to sell.
Yeah, and there's something too about how writers, if I sold you a script, it becomes your script. I have no ownership over it. Unlike a book, for instance, you still have ownership over
right
the prop. But if I sell you a movie, I'm done. I'm out of the picture.
That's right. Sometimes you have a back end. But, we call them monkey points because, I've never seen any net profit on any movie I've done. And I know for sure, there are movies that have made a fortune, that I, very well, according to the contract, should have been paid. And, the studios write everything off against the profitable movies and somehow find a way to cheat you. That's just the way it is.
Yeah.
Now, my understanding about the streaming services is that the Netflix model is that they buy it out and you're done.
Chain Reaction is the name of that movie. That's with
right.
Ken Reeves.
Reaction, exactly.
Jackson Walter says that he says, has anyone else read Father Christmas by Rowdy? Fantastic book, and made me a hero with my relatives as a gift. So somebody out there's read in my chat's read your book.
Well, thank you, Jackson. Yeah, I'm very proud of it. Again, it's so it was a labor of love, and there's an audio book too.
Oh,
So I
very cool.
recorded.
That's very cool.
And
Um, this is from Jan Man Chronicles. You may have already answered this a little bit with both Roadhouse and, of course, with Striking Distance. But Jan Man says, Rowdy, was there a moment in your film career in which the studio or producer made you change or edit your movie in the name of their politics or belief system, and how did you handle it?
yeah, you bitch like as much as you can. I got into screaming battles with my executives over some changes that essentially it just comes out down from on high. And part of it is driven by, the previews or what they consider the previews to be. Gladiator was a perfect example. There were some scenes in there where we had an audience and then a focus group after the movie, right? And they're young kids. And if one kid talks about a scene that he was uncomfortable with, sometimes they'll take that as a negative that they want taken out, when in fact, making them uncomfortable about the scene is the point. And it in the end, makes them feel better about the movie ultimately, because they get over that feeling. And, it happened in a couple of different times. And, as far as Roadhouse goes, mostly it was just about some of the dark jokes, the vulgar language.
Mm-hmm.
And, that was Joel's deal. He said it's for 13-year-old boys.
Mm-hmm.
We had begun shooting and he was having previews for Predator. And he came on the set and he was just on fire. And he said, we just had a preview for Predator. And he said, this kid, he ran out into the lobby and he threw up. He said, shit. So, okay.
How do you feel about test screenings, by the way?
Well, you learn a lot. You can, there was a scene in Gladiator where Tommy walks up to his girlfriend in front of the school and says, let's ditch, and she said, oh, I don't know. He says, come on, I want to show you something. Well, the kids all laughed as soon as he said, I want to show you something, because they thought he was going to show her his dick, and what made it worse was the next shot, he takes her to the aquarium in Chicago and he says, this is where I come. Well, the house came down and, that had to come out,
Mm-hmm.
we had to cut it, it was a mistake. You didn't think of it in those ways, but you get blindsided.
Yeah.
And, it's really good to experience the movie with an audience. You get to see what you did. And, I'll tell you, the best experience I've ever had is with Stick Up, because I watched that movie with the audience and everything I wanted them to do, they did. So that was very, very satisfying.
Very cool. Actually, let's see. My buddy Uncanny Spirit says that he just wanted to let you know that Striking Distance is his grandmother's favorite Bruce Willis film.
Well, good for grandma.
Somebody out there loves it.
Yeah, if I could have 5 minutes with her, she'd punch Bruce in the nose.
My buddy, the Kentucky Cunt-tator, has a very deep question. He says, Jack's Back is a film with Jungian symbology. He mentioned, Rowdy, you mentioned self-realization earlier. Did Mr. Herrington consciously convey these themes of the dual nature of man or our shadow self?
Well, I go back to that radio documentary about those two gentlemen, one of whom was a doctor and the other on death row. And they're twins. So, that duality, as a matter of fact, the first title I had for it was Gemini. And so, yes, I was aware of, I started to do research about twins, and, there are amazing things that they've connected, where, for example, one twin got hurt and the other would feel the pain. This connection that, whether it's ESP or, how you can define it, I don't know. but it's bigger than just happenstance. I mean, there's something to this. And when I read about that, that created the moment where Spader wakes up when his brother's hung,
Mm-hmm.
And he saw it. And that drives the picture. So, I can't say that I had read Young, but I can tell you that duality was very present, and exciting in terms of how, you could have the same persona, the same actor in a sense for two different characters,
Mm-hmm.
And to watch that change, the arc of character.
I've seen that attempted in other movies, and it just doesn't work. It never works as well as it did in Jack's Back.
Well, thank you. That year, I think there were 3 other movies about twins. I can't remember another one since, but Cronenworth did one. And there was the one, I guess it was Schwarzenegger and Danny DeVito. And
there's a movie called it's called Urban Legend Final Cut, where a character is killed and then the same actor comes on as his twin brother to try and solve his brother's murder. You may have a legal case there, as a matter of fact. I don't know.
Yeah, it's pissing up a rope. It's really tough.
Yeah.
It's even hard to get a lawyer to do it. Fred Taylor, he wrote a script called Yesterday. And it's a girl, but she's the one who wakes up with all the Beatles songs. And Universal had the script, and he was trying to get somebody to help him because that they took his idea. Mm-hmm. And it was it parallel universe. Somebody came up with the same idea somewhere else, or did somebody hear about his script and
Yeah. One last question here from Gypsy Warrior. He says, Rowdy, what do you think of Ridley Scott's Gladiator?
I enjoyed it. Actually, I wrote a script for a company that they wanted 7 in ancient Rome, and it never got made, but it had a lot of similar characteristics.
Oh, wow.
A general who ends up in jail, and they're going to make him a gladiator, but they bring him out to solve these murders. So it was a murder mystery version of Gladiator, but it has a lot of similar elements.
Oh, that's really interesting.
But I enjoyed the movie. Ridley Scott makes wonderful pictures. I watched The Martian like 5 times. Loved it.
Yeah, great filmmaker.
Alien, oh my God.
Oh yeah.
He gets it.
Yeah. That's all. There were a couple of people who wanted to know about Bobby Jones. I neglected Bobby Jones because I didn't want to keep you much longer. But I love Jim Caviezel. I think Jim Caviezel has got there's something so calming and soothing about his voice that it's like it hypnotizes you or something.
He's a wonderful actor, and I had a wonderful time with him.
Did you do a lot of research? When you're doing a biopic, I assume your responsibility is to do a lot of research.
There were a couple of scripts that they gave me before I started writing my script, and some of that made it into my script because they were biographical things that were important in his life, and some of them were well done, and so there's shared credit on the screenplay as a result. But what I did was I went back to him as a boy, and the idea for me is always arc of character. So you want to see that change. So he goes from child to adult. He goes to leader, and visionary in a sense. He can walk away from the game. Never became professional. All that stuff is true. He's a really remarkable character. The hard part was he was just a terrific person. Aside from early on, he had some problems with his temper, and he threw a club and he hurt a woman. And we had to play that up in order to get some conflict. And he had a relationship with Walter Hagen, who Jeremy Northam did a fabulous job. But, you know, we were actually scouting locations in Atlanta. And I was sitting in the office and I was just staring at the screenplay on my computer. And one of the producers came over and he said, what are you thinking? I said, you know, there's a scene missing here about why does Bobby Jones play golf? And I said, you know, and it just came to me, because when you identify a problem, you can solve it. And that's the whole key, I think, to writing, is identify the problem. And I said, okay. Walter Hagen asked him, why do you play golf? And he says, because I love it and I want to win. He said, do you know why I play golf? For the money. I have to win. And that's why I'm going to beat you. And I just said it. And, you know, he said, write that down. And we did. And we filmed it.
Very cool. Well, man, that's all I've got for you. I just wanted to thank you so much for giving us your time this evening and talking about your great career. Again, I've been a big fan of yours going all the way back to when I first saw Jack's back. And so having the opportunity to speak with you about all of these movies has just been an absolute blast.
Well, thank you. I've had a lot of fun. And I appreciate all the kind words and the support.
Yes.
It's an interesting walk, you know. It really is. And there's a lot of ups and downs, and it's nice to, you know, to reminisce about that, and you know, it gives you energy to go forward.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I'm glad to hear you've got a lot of, like I said, a lot of things in the works, and I'm definitely looking forward to whatever you do next. As are a lot of people.
Well, I'll stay in touch, and please do from your end, and I'll keep you informed if anything's moving forward, and maybe you can help me get the word out.
I would love to.
Father Christmas.
Father Christmas is out. It's almost Christmas. Go look into it. Go watch Jack's back. Go watch Gladiator. Go watch Murder of Crows. Great movies. And forget about Striking Distance. Forget about that Willis guy. Who cares about him?
Yeah.
But again, thank you so much, sir. I appreciate it. And a huge thanks to everybody who tuned in. Let me give a shout out here to Gypsy Warrior for that £1.99 super chat. Thank you, Jamie. Thank you, Al. Thank you, Anthony. Thank you, Stubbs, Jackson, Lope, XK, Calhoun. Thank all you guys for tuning in. Kentucky, Joe, it was a lot of fun. Appreciate it. And I'll play you guys out with some music. And again, Mr. Herrington, pleasure. Take care. Stay safe. And
all right, Jason. And as I said, let's stay in touch.
Absolutely, sir. Thank you very much. You have a great rest of your evening.
Thank you.
All right. Take care. So you guys, y'all take care. We'll see you again really soon. Peace.